2 words. That's all it took. I quit. No press conference. No microphones. No cameras waiting outside an arena. Just 2 quiet words, allegedly spoken inside a closed training facility in San Juan, and within hours, the entire landscape of women's basketball felt like it was cracking under the weight of speculation. Because when those words are even whispered next to the name Caitlin Clark, they don't stay contained. They detonate. Rumors moved faster than official statements. Social feeds erupted before anyone could verify anything. Analysts scrambled. Fans polarized. And the reaction itself told a deeper story than any confirmation ever could. This wasn't just gossip about a player. This was the sport collectively holding its breath over the possibility that its most watched, most dissected, most commercially transformative figure might be reaching a breaking point. But the loudest headlines missed the real tension entirely. This was never about emotion or impulse. Pressure at this level is never sudden, it's engineered slowly, invisibly, structurally. What happened in that gym was not chaos. It was the predictable outcome of a system that had been tightening for over a year. Every roster decision, every coaching appointment, every philosophical clash had been stacking like dry timber waiting for a spark. And if something about the situation felt uneasy from the very beginning, that instinct wasn't accidental. Because long before any controversy surfaced, the warning signs were already there, buried in plain sight. To understand the magnitude of the tension, you have to start with scale. Caitlin Clark didn't just enter the WNBA, she altered its gravitational pull. Her rookie season with the Indiana Fever was not merely impressive, it was historically disruptive. League-leading assists. Elite scoring production. A franchise turnaround that statistically defied normal developmental timelines. But numbers alone don't capture the real shift. Television ratings surged. Arenas filled. Conversations about women's basketball escaped traditional boundaries and entered mainstream sports discourse with unprecedented force. Clark wasn't operating inside the league's existing spotlight, she was expanding it. Yet paradoxically, institutional recognition never seemed to move at the same velocity as public impact. When she was left off the Team USA Olympic roster ahead of Paris, the justification centered on patience and professional proof. Fair enough. Prove it at the next level. So she did, emphatically. And when her name finally appeared on a subsequent national team list, the announcement carried none of the symbolic weight typically granted to generational talents. No framing. No narrative emphasis. No acknowledgement of what had just occurred across the sport. It felt procedural, almost indifferent, as though the most influential new force in women's basketball had been processed like a routine inclusion rather than a transformational presence. Then came the coaching decisions, the true catalyst for unease. Philosophies matter. Systems matter. Fit matters. Elite players don't just adapt to structure, structure must also adapt to elite players. And when stylistic mismatches appear at the highest competitive levels, friction is inevitable. Not because of personality, but because of basketball logic itself. Layer onto that the reappearance of Stephanie White, a coach already deeply embedded in Clark's professional environment, and the dynamics became impossible to ignore. Continuity can be stabilizing, but it can also be constraining. For transcendent talents, growth often demands disruption, new voices, new frameworks, new challenges. Remove that reset, and tension doesn't just emerge, it compounds. By the time whispers of conflict surfaced in San Juan, the foundations of that conflict had already been laid. Not through drama, but through structure, expectation, and the unforgiving mechanics of elite competition. But here is where the story stops being about a rumor and starts becoming about something far more uncomfortable for the sport itself. Because when you strip away the noise, the speculation, the social media exaggeration, what remains is not a question of whether 2 words were spoken inside a gym. The real question is why so many people found the story instantly believable. Rumors only gain oxygen when they align with something audiences already suspect. And that is the detail that should make everyone inside elite basketball circles uneasy. The idea that a player of Caitlin Clark's stature, a player who had just carried unprecedented visibility, unprecedented scrutiny, and unprecedented commercial gravity on her shoulders, might feel friction inside a national team environment did not feel absurd to fans. It felt plausible. Almost logical. That reaction did not materialize out of nowhere. It was built on months of subtle signals, small moments, quiet inconsistencies that rarely dominate headlines but collectively shape perception. Watch closely enough, and you could see the tension forming long before San Juan ever entered the conversation. Because basketball at this level is never only about talent. It is about control, who has it, who yields it, and how systems respond when a player's influence begins to exceed traditional hierarchies. At the center of this storm sits an uncomfortable collision between two forces that rarely coexist peacefully: institutional culture and generational disruption. USA basketball has always been constructed on principles of continuity, seniority, and defined roles. That structure has historically produced dominance, stability, and gold medals. But Clark represents something structurally different from the archetype those systems were designed to manage. She is not simply a high-performing guard. She is an ecosystem-shifting presence whose style of play demands freedom, pace manipulation, creative latitude, and heavy decision-making authority. Her game thrives not within rigid orchestration but within dynamic space, quick reads, high pick-and-roll volume, off-ball movement that bends defensive geometry. When that kind of player enters a system designed to prioritize controlled tempo and distributed hierarchy, the tension is mathematical before it is emotional. This is not about ego. It is about basketball physics. Put a high-usage offensive engine into a structure built for balanced initiation, and friction is inevitable. Not because anyone is wrong, but because philosophies clash at their core. Every possession becomes a negotiation. Every rotation choice becomes a statement about identity. And for a player whose instincts are wired toward constant creation, constraint can feel less like coaching and more like compression. That is why the presence of Stephanie White triggered such a strong undercurrent of debate among observers who study these dynamics closely. Continuity between professional and national environments sounds harmless on the surface, even beneficial. Familiarity can reduce adjustment periods. Terminology stays consistent. Expectations remain clear. But elite development often requires the opposite. Growth at the highest levels is fueled by exposure to contrasting frameworks, not repetition of the same voice. Historically, the world's greatest players evolved by encountering coaches who challenged their habits rather than reinforcing them. New systems force cognitive expansion. Different philosophies uncover dimensions A. Primary environment may never access. Remove that variation, and you risk stagnation, not in skill, but in adaptability. For Clark, the optics alone created a narrative vulnerability. If success followed, continuity would be praised. But if performance dipped, if rhythm faltered, if usage shifted unfavorably, the explanation would not revolve around structural redundancy. It would land squarely on the player. That asymmetry of accountability is what quietly magnifies pressure. Because athletes at Clark's level understand something casual audiences often overlook: reputations are shaped less by context than by outcomes. Systems rarely absorb blame. Players do. Inside the training environment itself, these tensions do not need explosive confrontations to become real. High-performance settings amplify subtleties. A slight reduction in touches. A shift in play-calling emphasis. A hesitation in late-game decision hierarchies. None of these elements appear dramatic in isolation. Yet collectively, they define how a player experiences trust, agency, and role clarity. Guards, especially creators,